In this video, we're going to be looking at and analyzing this sentence using the 4-level analysis method from E.M. Forster's A Passage to India, published in 1924. So we're going to go through all 4 levels here, from parts of speech to parts of sentence, then to phrases, and finally to clauses. And this is a more interesting sentence, as we're soon to see. We're going to go ahead and get right into the first level here with parts of sentence. So the first word right away is a little bit interesting. So though here in this case is one of those more strange words that it's not apparent what it is right away, because it may look like it might be a preposition or even an adverb, but in fact this is an example of a conjunction, because it's kind of separating two ideas. It's introducing a new idea, almost like a transition word. Those words were questions. It's kind of like comparing two things. It's serving as a comparison word. That's why it's a conjunction. So that's the story behind that word. Moving on to the next one, his. This is again an adjective, as we saw from the previous video. And the adjective in this case, his, is describing the words. And the words in this case, it's a noun. It's his word. That's why his is an adjective, and words is a noun. So then we have were, that's a verb, it's describing an action. The words were, that's a verb, something that's happening, what the words were doing. Querulous is an adjective, and also an MCT word as a vocab. We'll explain that later up on the vocab section. Querulous is the adjective that's describing the word, it's modifying the noun words. The words were querulous, it's a description there. Then we have his again, that's another adjective. In this case, it's describing heart, which is the noun. Then we've got began, which is a verb. That's the action that the heart is taking. The heart began, it's a verb. Next we have to. Now this is a very interesting formation here, to glow. This is actually a compound noun because to glow is a thing you do. A noun is a person, place, or thing, and to glow is a thing you're doing, the to glow action. So this is a compound noun here. Both words are nouns, so we just mark it like that. And secretly is an adverb, in this case, because it's, in this case, describing began. How did it begin? It did it secretly. That's the modifying there. The adverb is modifying the verb, so that's what that is. Okay, we've completed level 1, parts of sentence now. We can now begin to move into level 2, which is parts of sentence. And this is a more interesting sentence when it comes to the subjects and the predicates. So right away, we can see we have a noun and a verb, but also a second pair, another noun and another verb. So that's a telltale indicator that we might have 2 clauses describing different actions and different subjects in the sentence. So we're going to go ahead and start off with our first noun-verb pair, words were. So words is going to be the subject. The subject has to be the noun or the pronoun, but this is the, there aren't any pronouns in this sentence, so it has to be here. Words is the subject. Then were is going to be a linking verb predicate, or LVP in this case, because it's kind of acting as a linking equation. The words were querulous. Words equals querulous, where querulous equals the SC, or subject complement. And this complements the subject by filling in the equation and describing, in this case, what the words were. So our completed subject LVP SC equation here is words equals querulous. The words were querulous. Okay, so that's our first subject predicate pair. Now we have one more pair here. We've got heart and began, noun and verb. And this is obviously going to be another subject predicate because we see there's another clear action here. We've got heart, began. That's an action. So heart is going to be our subject. And then began is going to be our AVP. This is an action, the action verb predicate. The heart began. It took the action of beginning. And then we have a DO in this sentence because the DO is describing the action, the recipient of the action of the AVP. In this case, the heart began to glow secretly. That's what happened here. So we're going to go ahead and fill in the DO. It's the rest of the sentence. to glow secretly. That's what the subject did. It began to glow secretly. That completes the thing there. So we have two subject-predicate pairs here. We can now begin to move into the phrases section for level 3. We've got just one phrase here, and this is a special type of phrase called an infinitive phrase. And an infinitive phrase describes the action of doing something, or in this case, to do something, to glow secretly. That's the infinitive form here. And whenever you see the word to accompanied by an action, like to glow, it's usually going to be an infinitive phrase. So we can mark this in the entire rest of the sentence, to glow secretly, as an infinitive phrase, because we can see that compound noun form there, to glow, and that's a usual indicator that this is an infinitive phrase. So we can mark this off as an infinitive. It's just this portion of the sentence, not anywhere else. Okay, so now for level 4, the final level, which is the clauses. And we've got two clauses, as noted earlier. We have the subject LVP clause and the subject AVP clause. So those are the two clauses. Now, there are two different types of clauses you could have in a sentence. There's a dependent type, which is usually characteristic of a sentence fragment or an idea that's not complete. Like in this case, those words were querulous. On its own, that doesn't make any sense. So we know that must be the dependent clause. So we're going to go ahead and fill this in here. Those words were querulous. That's the dependent part of it. So that's the first part of the sentence. Go ahead and fill this in here. Now there's a second type of clause that we're also going to have in this sentence. And that's the usual type of clause that we typically see alone in a sentence, but sometimes can be accompanying an independent or dependent. So that's the independent clause, and that's what's composing up the other part of the sentence. An independent clause just contains a complete idea on its own. In this case, his heart began to glow secretly. That's a sentence that could stand on its own. So the entire rest of the sentence is our independent clause here. So this is independent, just standing entirely on its own here. Okay. Okay, we filled in the sentence for the clauses, and this is a special type of sentence form called a D, I complex sentence. And they call it a D, I because we've got a dependent clause, that's the D, then a comma, right in here, that's the comma after querulous, separating the dependent clause from the independent clause, the whole rest of the sentence. So it's a D, dependent clause, comma, independent clause, complex sentence. We call it complex if there are two different types of clauses, in this case dependent and independent, and we call it compound if there are two types of the same clause there, such as independent and independent. Okay, so this is a D, I, complex sentence here. It's just a usual declarative sentence because it's not asking a question, it's just a declaration here. So we have a D, I, complex sentence, and we've successfully analyzed, using the 4-level analysis, we've successfully analyzed this sentence on all 4 levels, from the parts of speech, to parts of sentence, to phrases, and finally to clauses. So yes, that's pretty much it for this sentence. This was a more interesting one, where we had 2 clauses, a subject and LVP linking equation, and a subject action-verb equation here, like an action-predicate pair on the final half of the sentence here in the independent clause. And we also had an infinitive phrase, to glow secretly. So that's the complete analysis of this sentence from E.M. Forster's A Passage to India. And this sentence was part of the Michael Clay Thompson 4-level analysis for practice curriculum.